ready. I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Hey, we're live for another session 0. It feels good. It feels good to be back.
It does.
I tell you what, one thing I want to touch on before we start the show. I've been watching a lot of like modular synth stuff and other like hardware and analog synthesizer things. I don't know how I ended up on that. And I have a Scarlett, Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, whatever. It came with a DAW called, what's it called?
That's a weird name for it.
I knew the word. No, I knew the word a second ago. It's like Ableton or what the heck is it called?
Ableton. Let's look it up.
No.
Digital audio workstation. Ableton.
Ableton Live. And I opened it up and I was like, maybe I could figure this out. And then I looked at it. Hey, what's up, Jeff? Welcome.
What up, dog?
And I was like, maybe I could figure this out. And I couldn't, but maybe I just don't know the software at all, right? I watched some YouTube videos of people like making music with it, and I was like, oh, never mind.
Really?
That's never going to happen. I am like beginner level. I'm so far before being able to do anything. Like, you would have to spend so much time that I don't have to learn how to use that software.
It's funny that you were looking up synth stuff. And I was looking up synth stuff and it was, we were sharing it with each other, and it was the same freaking guy. It was like
Yeah,
what
was that about?
Channel. Yeah, that was weird. It was adorable.
It was really cute.
Yeah. All right. What do you think? Let's get the show on the road.
Oh, you're ready to go?
I'm ready to rock,
I better
man.
get like pumped up here. All right.
Yeah. What are you drinking, real quick?
I am drinking Founders All Day Haze, a low percent alcohol hazy IPA.
Okay. Very cool. I have the finest Yeti mountain water.
From Yetis. Yeti urine.
Yeah, it's urine. It's the sweat of Yetis.
Obviously.
Chilled.
All right, here we go. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to episode 3 of Session 0, a podcast for beginner DMs by 2 beginner DMs. I'm Ben, along with my friend Ryan, and tonight we're going to take you on a journey of adventure of us learning how to run tabletop RPGs. So how's it going tonight, Ryan?
Oh man, it is great. It is great. I am excited to talk today about. There's some new stuff that I've been into, and we actually have Mick.
Yo, what's up,
who's
Mick?
in the chat here? And the first thing I wanted to talk about, if I can, is what I've been doing with him.
I want to hear it. Let me sit back and spin me a tale. Spin me a yarn. Isn't that the same?
Is it really spin me a yarn?
I don't know. I want to hear this.
Okay. All right. So let me get my prep here. So if you don't know, Mick, MC Dave MC is really what he goes by. He's a good friend of ours, and he's been for a long time, role player, right? So he owns maybe every book,
all of them,
that you could possibly get for every system that exists. Right?
A library of tabletop books,
millions of them.
Okay.
So recently, he sent an email out to a bunch of us, and he was like, listen, I really want to have an IRL RPG kind of standing night.
Who doesn't?
Right. And so the idea wasn't just to play D&D. It was to play all these books of his that he's never gotten a chance to, or just kind of go through a bunch of different systems. Maybe play, a few. We'll have to talk to Dave. Maybe we'll have him on next show, and we can kind of talk to him and ask him what his plans are exactly and specifically. But basically, the idea is every, I don't know how often we're going to do it. We're going to switch systems, but we're going to keep trying different things. The system that we played the most recent time I was over was called Numenera. Have you heard of Numenera?
You had mentioned it the other day when you first played it, like we were kind of talking in our chat, and I know I've heard the term, but I don't think I knew anything about it.
I'm going to take a lot of what I said to you in our chat, to explain about it. So it's
Right.
Numenera is really like the world attached to this system called the Cipher system, which exists as Numenera that we're playing. But there's also like a rule book that's just like neutral Cipher system, which isn't attached to the world of Numenera in any way. And you can use the rules and incorporate any, world or whatever into your system. Actually, right before I start, how does my microphone sound today?
There's no hum. You sound great to me.
That's all I wanted to. Okay, so we didn't get super far when we played, and we only played this one time because it was a lot of character creation. But here's the basics. Okay, the system's based on these like cipher cards, which are basically items, treasure, loot that you get, and they're always one-time use. Each player character has a limit to how many they can have at one time, so they can have unlimited ciphers. But once they go beyond their limit, their percentage chance of something crazy happening increases. Okay.
Now, are these physical cards?
Dave has physical cards. I don't know if Dave goes all out with stuff, right? So I don't know if you're supposed to like kind of make them up or if they're always physical cards. But Dave has physical cards.
Print them out. So it's something he bought. It's not like he printed them and put them in sleeves or something.
No, they're like actual cards.
Okay.
Yeah. So they might come with the system. Maybe Dave can answer us in the chat if he's still around. But so let's say my hand limit is 3. I can have 3 ciphers. And at the start of my turn, I have 4 because you can always get more, right? That'll give me we'll say a 10% chance of something like effed up happening to me. And I got to make a roll based on that. And if I fail, all my ciphers could blow up and deal me damage or something crazy like that. And the craziest thing, he says there are tables.
Okay, there's tables. I gotcha. Cards are an upgrade.
I kind of figured that's kind of how it was. But the cool thing is the GM doesn't roll dice.
Okay.
So instead, as Dave's talking about, there's tables, like a hit table. Yeah.
Such a bad roller. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So instead, you have like tables that are like a what do you call it? Like a 2-hit table. Okay. So for instance, if there's a monster and Dave says this is a level 1 monster, the table will say, okay, you got to make a D20 roll of 3 or greater to hit this level 1 monster. And then you simply deal damage on like a light, medium, heavy scale automatically. It just automatically deals damage. A level 5 enemy might take like a 10 to hit or something. All things you do are based on these levels. So if I want to like disarm a trap, the GM tells you what level the trap is, and then you roll the same way as you would hitting a monster. It's really cool. Aside from the cipher system, each player also can get these experience cards. And these things are really cool, man. I think I've talked to you about ICRPG, how it gives out hero coins when you do something, like say you do something, that's worthy of like really good role play.
So
like
who determines?
One of your players, the GM determines all of this.
Okay.
So let's say, you do something really outlandish that turns out really cool. Something really cool. Whatever the GM decides is cool, he will then give you an experience card.
Okay.
And if you ever get 4 of these, you can choose to spend them to level something up, some attribute that can get stronger. You can also spend them to re-roll a failed check. And I really thought but the coolest thing, dude, about what the GM can do is he has this thing he can do called Dave, correct me if I'm gonna mess this up. It's called like GM opportunities or something like that. And really what that means is whenever they want, they can make something bad happen to you. So you have a decision to make right when he does that. So let's say GM intrusion. An intrusion. So let's say you are like walking along, and you find a treasure chest and you roll, you open it. And it's like, oh, cool. You succeeded and you're opening the chest. If Dave wants to, or whoever the GM is, he can just kind of be like, all right, GM intrusion is happening right now. And he's going to tell you something bad that will happen.
It's a mimic.
Yeah, right. It's a mimic. Exactly. It's a mimic. So you have a decision to make, right? That you can either allow the bad thing to happen to you. Okay, the mimic bites you. But then if you do that, you get 2 experience cards. So if the mimic bites you, you might take a lot of damage, but you'll get 2 more experience cards. And maybe those are the experience you need to level something up. Right. Actually, that's not true. I think you keep 1 and you have to give the other experience card to another player, which is really cool. Or if you don't do that, if you don't let the thing happen to you, you can spend an experience card you already have to prevent that bad thing from happening. And so it creates these really cool decision points because you're trying to collect these experience cards, but you're also trying to stay alive and get all these cool things to happen. You know what I mean?
Oh, I don't know if I could spend an experience point.
Yeah,
But what if you
it's like,
failed something important?
and maybe you only have one experience card, so if you get rid of it, it's not like you were just about to level
I
up.
don't know about that.
Yeah, but okay, let's say you're like this mimic like takes you down to like almost dead. I don't know. I haven't seen all the things he can do with it yet.
Right.
But man, I loved that part about it. So also during character creation, we all had these like player connections with other PCs at the table. So while we're creating our characters, my character had to choose 4 other player characters at the table. Okay. One of them I was like emotionally connected to. So they get a buff if they're next to me or something. One of them I was dangerously connected to. And so if they're next to me, they get a disadvantage to some attribute. Right.
Okay.
All these connections did different things based on which character you were. So we're all connected through this, and it forces some really cool like role play situations. You know what I mean? Because we kind of like we kind of create backstories of like, why do we have these connections with each other? And it kind of helps us strategize.
You have a little bit of a starting or a jumping off point for your relationships already. You don't have to develop them naturally, which can take a lot of time, I would say, in a normal like tabletop game. It's gonna be a while because that person needs to figure out who they are as a character and then play out that character in a way that lets you latch on to something to figure out how that relates to your character. So this is like a good place to be like, no, you have this sort of antagonistic relationship with this person, or you really like them or whatever. And it's like, okay, now I have something to build off of at least.
Yes, it jumps you in, which I really, really like. So back to the DM roll. So they never roll, like I said. So if they're the monster, they're like, okay, the monster attacks you and then you roll for defense. If you succeed, it just doesn't hit you. If you don't, it does. There was a cool moment where we were like shopping for items at this lady's rolling cart. Okay. And if you know Dave, which nobody does, but if you know him, that's not true. Not nobody does. If you know Dave, Dave goes all out for his RPG sessions. Okay. You might remember at Nerdfest, Ben, seeing his D&D campaign that he had, which were these elaborate set pieces.
I want to go all out. I want all that stuff.
It is the coolest fuck. It is so cool. And so we're at his house and he's got this entire town set up. Everything's painted. You can actually take the roofs off of the houses and go into the houses. Oh, it's so cool. There was like a little pond there with like this really big like shard sticking out. It was just very, very evocative, right? So we're at this actual rolling cart, like this lady's cart, right? My character is like really overzealous and enthusiastic, but also a little too act before you think kind of guy. That's kind of my character. And so I said I was rifling through her wares recklessly, just throwing things aside. And so Dave used that as a GM intrusion and said, okay, while you're rifling through the items, you accidentally step on a glass jar that's oozing this red liquid. The liquid begins to crawl up your leg and it's burning you and the pain is unbearable. And I lost 4 to my might, which is bad because I only start with 8 because I'm like this nano wizard character who's not very mighty, right? So right then I had to choose to either accept that and get 2 XP, one of my keep and one of my get someone else, or I'm half dead. But I'm half dead. Or I can spend an XP and now that doesn't happen, right? And that was the coolest decision point. I opted to just take the damage. I felt that was what would have happened given the nature of my character. And so I tried to play it off like it wasn't bothering me. So I didn't look stupid in front of the group. And Dave was like, as you walk away, the liquid is burning your clothes from your body. So you're basically naked. And it was just really funny as I pretended like I didn't even notice to save face. And everyone's watching it happen though. And so I just bolt towards the nearby pond. But it was really cool. And it was all because of that GM intrusion, which I think is in a sea of awesome mechanisms that this system has. That was what I think that was the coolest part. So I really enjoyed this system, dude. I cannot wait to play it more. It's really fast and loose and didn't seem like it needed much prep by the GM. But the system still felt robust and fun.
Did you have it? Is it so you had sort of like some social encounters? Did you have any combat encounters while you were playing?
No, we didn't really get too far in. So we made it to this town, and we spent most of the night. I mean, how long did we play, Dave? We played like 4 hours. 2.5 to 3 hours was just creating our characters.
And that's not surprising. Like if you want to put some time in, I know. Well, maybe I'll get into this a little bit later, but I had to make a bunch of D&D characters recently. I should have just used. I think there's websites out there that do it for you, but I tried to do it, and poof, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly. It was a session 0.5.
Okay.
Yeah, all so right. I would say we basically made our characters, and then we kind of got our feet wet with the rules.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing when you don't know the rules at all. We had that same exact experience with the game I'm running now. I thought we were going to have a session 0 where we were going to kind of talk through what was in store. But when we sat down at the table, two of the players had never played before at all. And Stephanie made it clear like she didn't really know how to play the game. And it wasn't going to make any sense then what we were going to talk about. I mean, we could talk about like background stuff or story stuff or whatever, but if you wanted to talk about like what character class do you want to be and how the game works, it was like, well, you don't know. So we might as well just start and then you'll get to see how the game works. And it was sort of the exact same thing, right? It was like a 0.5. And I thought it worked out pretty good.
It's cool, man. What I've grown to understand as I've been so, slowly getting my feet wet with RPGs in general, is they are much less scary than I originally anticipated. So I had the Star Wars RPG book, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars, that, which one? The white book, whichever one that was.
Destiny or...
Not Force and Destiny, but whatever. It was the Outer Rim. One. Yeah, the Scoundrels one.
Yeah, right.
So I had that one. And I'm reading through this book, and I'm like, I don't understand what the hell I'm supposed to. I have no clue. And so a couple of friends were like, go online and watch a session. And so I do, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, I don't get how I get from 0 to what these guys are doing. It seemed so over my head, and so I was like, if I got to read this fucking book to be able to do this, I don't think this kind of gaming is for me. And it wasn't until... and we talked about this last episode, but it wasn't until we played Grit with Jeremy that it all kind of clicked together. And I was like, oh, the rules are really just there as a bare bones nothingness to facilitate the storytelling, and you can just make any rule up you want, really, just here's some systems that work and have really cool things that are already built, maybe play in with these. But I found, sorry, I mean,
oh no, I was going to say it's like a structure to build your story on, right? It's like, but exactly what you were saying about how obtuse it is. That's and that's the very reason why we started this podcast, because RPGs from the outside looking in are obtuse and weird and confusing. You don't quite get it until you play it. And I felt like being a GM or a DM is exactly the same way. Even having played in games, without being behind the screen, it's like, well, I could never do that. Like, I don't know what you're doing back there, but I can't imagine that I could ever be back there doing it.
Yeah, like they're just a puppet master. They have or they're spinning like 10 plates in the air.
Yeah, or they're doing so much work ahead of time to prep or something like that. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on back there.
Well, look at you now, man. That's all you're doing. You're prepping for the next session while you're doing this podcast right now.
Right.
You can't see your left hand.
Wheels are always turning.
What's it doing? So what have you been up to?
Well, a bunch of stuff. And we only have so much podcast here to talk. So I've been trying to decide what to talk about. I quickly want to touch on maybe something I want to get your opinion on two things. The first is playing with kids, right? So you have run games for your family. And we've talked about that before. I wanted to just sort of practice a little bit, and I was trying to get the kids to play at home. Olivia, my oldest daughter, was not interested, but the two younger ones were somewhat. And I was like, I don't know. Well, we'll play the adventure from the starter kit, The Lost Mines of Phandelver. Just cool. It's like $20 at Target. Whatever. Well, the interesting thing is also the D&D Essentials kit has another adventure in it, the Dragon of Icespire Peak, but it takes place in the same area. Like the town is still the same town as in the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Phandalin is the town in both. And so what you can do is you could put the two together, and then you have a bunch of like tons of missions in the area, and you can build kind of your own campaign out of the two if you mash them together. And I thought that would be kind of fun.
Yeah, that's
and
really
then
cool.
Calvin's been drawing a lot of like weird monsters and stuff, and I was like, all right, well, Crystallosaurus is, instead of the Dragon of Icespire Peak, Crystallosaurus is up in the mountains or whatever. And I'll be honest, playing D&D with a 6 and 8-year-old it's not fun for me. Yeah. Because the game is too complicated for them. But they like to play RPGs. I think a better game to have played would have been like what we talked about last time, and play one of these simpler systems so that they could just get into it really quick, and I'm not having to explain how their character classes work.
Well, that's why Tiny Dungeon appealed to me so much, because the kids themselves really have to worry about nothing other than their creativity, which it sounds like is what Calvin enjoys the most. Is like, I want to make a monster. I want to, come up with these really cool ways to kill you, or and that's what my kids want to do too. They just want to, have a cool fighting method and jump off the wall and like springboard off and shoot some guy. They don't want to have to get mired in, well, I have to make this check, and then once I make this check, I got to see what the armor class is and the defense, and then do I have opportunity? All that stuff they don't really love. What they love is just like, all I have to do is I'm going to tell you what I want to do, and then I'm going to roll, and if I roll a 5 or a 6, I hit it.
Oh, right. Okay, so Seth here, Seth's going to be our guest in a little while. He says he ran the same intro box combo for his kids and his wife, Christine. Maybe we can ask Seth about that later when he's on the show, about how that went. I'm really curious. I feel like adventure-wise, that adventure is actually pretty awesome for like a first time running the game, first time playing the game. I feel like it's an excellent introduction. Part of my problem has been like Calvin, I was looking through some stuff and I was like, let's try this thing that I picked up. I got the Beast Heart class from MCDM, and it's like a third party D&D class, but it has, first you have a pet that you have to control, and you control your character. So you essentially play almost like a ranger. Like typically you play like a ranger, and then you have like a pet, and you are controlling each other, and then there's rules for how it works. And the pet is generating ferocity, and then all of your class abilities trigger off of spending ferocity, either to have like your companion do something or you do something. And so he needs to like manage this other resource that like it isn't even a base part of D&D to trigger multiple abilities that he's not necessarily reading through the book to know how they work. So it's definitely been very complicated. But at the same time, like what's interesting is he gets how the game works. Yeah. Like you were like he gets it. He to the point where like they were trying to sneak into this hideout, and he was like, all right, well, what did he find? He found a hat that he could cast disguise self on himself, and he was like, okay, I make myself look like one of the bad guys. Yeah, and he cast that on himself. Yeah. And then they're called like red brands, and they have these red cloaks, and Elsa had found a cloak that you could make it look like anything, and she was like, okay, I make my cloak look like one of theirs. And then they go in and they find these guys, and they're like, I've never seen this person before, and Calvin's like, oh, this is a new recruit that I'm just bringing around. I'm going to introduce you to her right now.
6-year-old Calvin, that's impressive.
And then he was like, why don't you guys come with me? And he like leads them over to this, like, there's like a little crevasse, and he just like, I push him in. And I was like, but it made Elsa kind of mad because
he's doing all the cool stuff.
He's doing all this cool stuff, and she was like, she's not quick with like thinking of what to do yet. And she was like, stop doing everything.
Yeah, I want a cool moment like that.
Yeah, right. And I was like, well, yeah, but he's coming. I'm not like telling him to do this. Like, you can come up with anything you want. And I was like, all right, Calvin, we'll just talk to her about it first if you have a funny idea. Because he was like, he didn't tell her anything. He was like, all right, hey guys, why don't you follow me out here? And he's like, I kick him in.
So what's not fun about it then? That sounds awesome to me. Is the system itself beyond them, like the rules and the the distance and measuring all that stuff and all the armor class? Is that they're having trouble with, and why it's not fun?
What's not fun? They are having a lot of fun. They're having a blast. What's not fun is that I've never played a barbarian, which is Elsa's class, and I've also never played a beast heart, which is not even a player's handbook class. And so, I wanted them to get into some like fun stuff, so I've leveled them up. They're level 4. They have or 3 maybe. Anyway, they have a lot of abilities, and I was like, okay, well, hold on. When a barbarian rages, what does that do? And I was like, oh, shoot, I got to look it up. Okay, you have resistance to certain damages, and you get extra damage to your attacks, and, oh, you have advantage on, like, perception rolls, or I don't remember what it is. I've never played. So I always have to look it up, right? And Calvin's like, I'm always like, remember to roll your ferocity die, and then take your action for your companion, and then what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, well, I want to, like, pick up their weapon, and, like, I want to stab them. I was like, look, man, you got, like, 10 abilities on your sheet. Like, let's start with those. Like, you have all this ferocity built up. Spend it to do one of these cool things. Like, have your guy dig up from underneath him and swing him around. That'll give you advantage on your attack. You'll be more likely to hit him. Now, as a gamer, you'd be like, wow, this is really cool, this class, actually. It's actually a really awesome character class. But I'm like running his character and running Elsa's character and running the game. And all they're doing is like coming up with like fun stuff to do, and they're having a blast.
Yeah, right, because that's what they want to do. They don't want to get mired into the details. So can you not dumb it down for them? Can you not just, instead of like, oh, he's got this rampaging die, he's got to do that, can't you just be like, okay, roll, and if you make it 15, you hit him, and you do what you want to do? Like,
absolutely.
Could you just do that? Do you
100%.
not? Is that something you don't want to do? Do you want to teach them?
I want to teach them. I want to teach them the game, because eventually they're going to learn it, and I think that they'll want to play it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think that once they learn it, they'll want to, and maybe they won't. Right. Not everybody is going to latch on to Dad's hobbies. Like. But I want to teach them this game specifically because if you learn this system of D&D, there is so much content to then go and pull from. And that's the thing with Calvin is the classic like first grade boy, who would want to go watch Dragon Ball Z or something and just see like, I want to see the power level high. The only questions he ever asks me are like, can you show me the highest CR monsters in any book you have? Right. I have Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and it has like great worms in it. They're like as big as like a village. They're like 1,200-year-old dragons. And he's like, just wait until you got to fight one of those.
Yeah, that is all they care about. I agree. I mean,
they care about.
Seth actually says the same thing here. He says the rules are getting in the way of your fun. Same situation for me, a full page of abilities and spells, and all they want to do is whatever they want to do. That's true. Yeah. I mean, all 100%. My kids love playing games with me, but all they're really interested in is like Elsa. I want to be the one that does the cool thing. And so what I notice with them, and Seth, I don't know how old your kids are, but my kids will lose interest. Their attention span is not very long. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if they are sitting there and they have to go, and this isn't a knock against what you're doing with them, Ben, but if they have to sit there and go, okay, how do I do what I want to do? I will lose them. Maybe Cameron would stick around, but Lexi and Scarlett, I would lose them. So basically, we just kind of get into a situation. I'm like, okay, roll for initiative. We see what order we go in. And then I'm like, Scarlett, it's your turn. What do you want to do? You have about 5 seconds. Not to decide, but your turn's going to take about 5 seconds in real life. What are you going to do? And she'll come up with something really cool. Like, I'm just going to run across the landscape and throw she has a tambourine because she's like this musician thing. And it's got like spikes on for the clackers, And so she'll be like, I'm going to throw my tambourine at the wall, and it's going to stick in the wall right in front of the enemy and scare him. And I'm like, that's fucking sweet. That's really fucking cool. Roll a d6 and see if it happens. And she rolls and it's a 5 and it works. And then that's her turn and it's over, and it's that way for everything. And that's how I have kept them engaged. Scarlett will sit at the table with us, and she's like Calvin's age. And she'll sit at the table for 3 hours while we play a scenario. And I think a lot of that is a testament to my amazing storytelling abilities.
Obviously. Your ability to grab attention and hold it.
I command a room. No, I think personally that it's the simplicity of the system. Now, Cameron wants something a little more robust. So we're going to start moving to ICRPG pretty soon. Because he's looking for something. He would probably love to play in your D&D game, I'll bet.
Yeah, I like he wants something he's leveling up in, right?
He wants to feel like what I'm doing is getting me somewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and I need what I need to do, you look at like encounter types. I just need to have more non-combat encounters for them to be able to like
puzzles.
Yeah,
something cool to do.
Just or like talking to people or figuring stuff out or whatever. But then again, that's tough with kids. If they don't have somebody that's showing them how like a role-playing game works, that can also bog down, right? And I don't know how did you like you have Natalie play with you. Does she lead that kind of stuff, or did she have to do it more and now she does it less?
Yeah, so here's one example. I brought them into this underground cavern, and there was a wall blocking their main path, basically. And if they stepped on, there was a bunch of runes on the floor, okay? And they were like different colors, and some of them were matching. And so I kind of showed that on the map I had laid out for them, but they just assumed it's just stuff on the ground. Natalie would be like, hey, I wonder if those different color symbols mean something. And then all the kids are like, oh, I'll bet you're right. I'll bet it does. So that's what she's been doing. So I wouldn't say she necessarily like tells them everything and leads them that way. But there are certainly things where they would have no clue probably how to, go from one step to the other at the beginning, that Natalie just kind of easily was like, oh, what do you think this means? And then they latch on. So now they're much more aware of that stuff happening because they've seen it now. So now they know like, okay, pretty much everything means something in this room, so I want to make sure to check it all out.
And I think really, if we talk about like tonight, the theme of tonight's episode is trying to make a game that's fun for your players and how to meet your player expectations. And, that's kind of why we're going to bring Seth in. I think while Seth has run some games, he's played in a lot of games. My experience he's a friend of mine. He's in our game group. We play with him. I think his experience with being a player from both sides of the screen, we can talk about a lot of like, how do you make a game fun for players and meet the different thing that players want? So we're talking about like the kids right now is like, how do I make a game that's fun for the kids? Because D&D combat, once they learn it, could be fun. But like right now, Elsa's a barbarian. I swing my axe or I rage, right? Like that's her only options. While Calvin is like, okay, I'm going to have my boule dig in the ground, come up under the guy and grab him. And then once he's grabbed, I'm going to run over and I'm going to like throw this scimitar at his face and then punch him. And she's like, why is Calvin's turn take like an hour? And my turn's like 30 seconds. But I ran into like a similar situation recently in our game, and Seth's ears are going to be burning for this. This is a little like behind the screen stuff, but like, oh well. I think it's a worthwhile thing to talk about because I was really concerned about how I was going to handle something that came up recently. So the party was going into a town, this like bog town, and it had a couple of overlapping stories happening at the same time. There was like some bad guys in the town, and the part of the mission was to figure out how to get to them, where they were, and then like assault this compound and also kind of avoid their cronies the whole time that are messing with you. Also, secretly, there's a cult that's trying to take over the town from these bad guys. So these bad guy toughs are kind of like, they've got the mayor on their payroll. They've got the constable on their payroll. And those people aren't necessarily bad guys, but they're like, well, like, I might as well get paid for being here. Like, I'm not going to, you guys have the muscle anyway, so I'm not going to argue with you. And also those bad guys were involved in like the killing of the party's like family, like their troop. But anyway, there's this cult that's like, oh yeah, we'll definitely help you out, get rid of these guys. They want to get rid of them so they can take over the town because they're like looking forward to like sacrificing a bunch of people to raise up some sort of like rot thing that they're trying to summon. And then so the cult is actually rolled into the wider story of the campaign. They're under the spell of like the big bad of the campaign. And I looked in the book at this module, and the monster that they summon was super lame. And I was like, no, it was like a pile of mush. It was like a CR3 monster. This is 5 level 4 characters who are relatively strong. And I was like, no, that's so freaking lame. So I went and I was like just doing tons of Google searches, and I found this like awesome like Herald of Rot thing, and I was like, hell yeah, like that's what gets summoned. Look at how awesome that thing is.
Boom. Yeah.
And that was from like this Reddit monster of the day thing from a few years ago. And then like the day before, through some more Google searches I found, it had these like little minions that went with it, these like rot globs that sort of like worked well with the monster. And I was like, this is going to be perfect. There's going to be rot globs that show up. There's going to be this big freaking flying Herald of Rot that comes out. This is going to be I was so excited for this combat. Plus there's the guy who's summoning it, and he's this cleric who can like cast spells, and he has all of his cronies. I was like pumped for this. So I figured all this out right before they went into the town. Then we did some of the town stuff. And then, okay, so now I'm excited for something. Then we started talking about out of game stuff, schedule. People are going to be gone over the next few weeks. There was spring break coming up. Maybe we're going to miss a session. Maybe somebody's going to be out. And I was like, well, I don't want everybody to miss the thing I'm excited about.
Right.
But I was like, I don't know. Well, here we go. Right. So the players went into the town. I felt they were kind of like figuring out a bunch of stuff. They latched onto this murder of a guy that had pushed some people out into the bog. They were like fugitives on the run. There was like a bounty on them, and they could go like hunt them down. And then like finding them is like a clue that
sounds so cool.
Not everything is as it seems. And so I felt like the players came up with like the coolest ideas. They wanted to investigate the murder scene. They wanted to lay a trap for the murderers to prove that, hey, the constable's on the pay of the bad guys. The bad guys did it because they're trying to quiet this witness that they made up. There wasn't even a witness. They like planted false evidence that there was a witness to trick the bad guys into going out and trying to kill them. They had these were just such cool ideas. And but I was like, shoot. Well, when is the Peace Day Festival? When is the thing where the Herald of Rot comes out?
Yeah.
Do I like delay it and have it be later, or do I do it now while everybody's here? And it just sort of worked out that like, okay, the Peace Day Festival is tomorrow. It ended up happening on that last night we were all together before our like week off, but the combat came up late, and I didn't want it to run until like midnight or 12:30 or something like that. So I sort of like cut some of the extra things that I was going to add, and some of the extra bad guys weren't there. And so I felt like the Herald of Rot was cool. He came out. It was a tough battle. It was probably the first time that we saw a player character go down. Maybe I need to be a little meaner. But I just couldn't help at the end of that feel like I was making in-game decisions because of out-of-game stuff. Whether it's schedule-wise or what's going to happen over the next few weeks, or there was the very night of like, I need to make this combat shorter because we're running out of time. And it's not like they knew what I had in mind for that combat.
True.
But I also feel like I let them down a little bit because I had this grand idea of like, this is going to be hard. And it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
Partly because of their smart decisions, right? They cast a silence and they trapped the spellcaster in it, shutting him down. Then they sort of like battled it out with the Herald of Rot pretty good, but it just, I don't know. Have you ever run into that kind of stuff where you're having to make in-game decisions because of out-of-game stuff?
All the time. Yes, absolutely. And there was something else you touched on there. I feel like it's easy to present your players with a situation where they're definitely going to win. That's my mindset every time with the kids anyway. I'm not punishing them too hard. I present them with puzzles to figure out, monsters to fight. But so far, they really haven't gotten into any real danger. Or maybe a better way of saying it is like, I'm not trying to kill them and have them think of a way to defeat me. I'm presenting them with like an IRL movie that they're playing in where things may look bleak, but the heroes are always going to win in the end.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I always see a lot of videos of like DMs or like reels, Instagram reels of DMs where they're playing and they're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to, I'm going to kill the players tonight. You know, they like are taking that really seriously. And maybe it's just because I'm playing with the kids, but I don't feel that, I don't know if I want to do that. And I also don't know if is that the right mindset? You know, should I want to kill them more?
Well, are stakes necessary for fun? With the kids, probably not. Like,
yeah, they just want to do the
be
cool
action
thing.
Heroes. Yeah,
they just want to do the cool thing. Yeah, exactly. Like for instance, we did this scenario not too long ago, and I think I told you about this one too, where they were basically they were competing in this cooking competition, and they had to go into these ice caves to fight these giant ice crabs to get the crab meat that they needed to use in a recipe in this cooking competition. And it was really cool. And they found there was this like salt deposit on the very top of the ceiling that was like dripping salt into this, it was like a pool, okay, in the middle of this ice cave. And there was these little tiny crabs around it. And Lexi's character has this spear, and it's this magical spear. So when she throws it, all she has to do is like put her hand out and it'll come right back to her. Okay. So she's like, I want to collect that salt and use that salt in the dish we're going to make. So she's like, I'm going to throw my spear at the salt deposit and it's going to fall and I'm going to try to catch it. And in so doing, the salt fell into the water and disturbed the water. And this giant mother crab came out, and she was enormous. And there was no way they were going to defeat her. The idea was they had to run away. So it's engaged with Lexi, and Lexi's like, I'm gonna kill this dang thing. Because up to this point, they kind of could fight whatever they wanted. And I had it have this claw attack. I'm making all this up, okay? So I'm like, it attacks you with the claw, and it rolls, and it dealt her 4 damage. And she already had 2 damage on her, and she had 6 health total. So she was in tears, bawling, like, I'm dead. You just fucking killed me. I'm dead. I lost my character. It's over. It wasn't like, oh, this is pretty sweet. I was like, oh my God, she's going to need therapy after this. I think I just traumatized her. And we had to like stop the game and be like, no, it's okay. You're not totally dead. I'm going to read the rules for how death works. But that was the closest that I've ever come to actually being really hard on them. And I think it didn't, I don't know that it made it better. You know?
Okay.
I don't know, but I don't think it's helping me as a GM to not do that at the same time. So it's a little conundrum I'm having.
Yeah, well, right. And are they? Yeah, they probably just want to feel like powerful and cool.
They want to do the cool thing. It's all they want. They just want to do the cool thing.
They're not necessarily being like where you're throwing something at them and you're like, I actually don't know how they're going to beat this. And they come up with something cool, something clever, a great idea, and they're like they overcome.
That does not happen. Right, that does not happen at all.
They're not playing at that level, right?
Which I think it should, but so it kind of speaks into what you're saying about, you know, like you said somebody was down for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. And let me ask you this: as the GM, how did that make you feel when he went down?
Finally.
So you weren't like, oh shit, what if he dies and now he hates me?
Man, they got so many tricks up their sleeves. He's not going to die. You kidding me? Not even close.
So you didn't think for a second that it was actual danger of being dead?
No, but I was really happy about the ability of the Herald of Rot, which I did not make up, was that he puts out an aura at which nobody can regain hit points within that aura.
Damn.
And then the cleric, Dylan, he's just like, all right, I cast Healing Word as a bonus action. I was like, it doesn't do anything. It's something very satisfying about that.
Was it Seth's character that got down? Who was
down?
It was. Oh man.
Well, because finally he has a magic item that has advantages against like fiends and celestials and demon, like devils and demons and that kind of stuff. And finally, here was a demon, here was a fiend, right? And man, he ran in there with
kill me, right,
with his bone sword, and the Herald of Rot didn't like that.
Do you think that the pacing is what was maybe not fun? Like, what were you worried about in that particular session that wasn't engaging to the players the way you wanted it to be?
The two things were they had created this scenario of the murder being a big deal, using it to pin down the bad guys so the town would be against them. Like, here's clear evidence that there is bad stuff going on here. We can prove it, and we'll show you how. And they came up with a lot of cool and clever ways to prove that. And so sidetracking that with, and everybody on your side in the town is a bad guy, I think that is a good thing to pull the rug out from under them, and I think it happened too soon. And I also think then that trying to squeeze that combat in with the time we had left in that game session made me have to make it smaller, because or we would have ran out of time. I didn't nerf any of the bad guys that were there. The Herald of Rot was the Herald of Rot. All the bad guys were the bad guys. The only thing that was that, like, several of the, like, maybe I would have thrown in a couple of more guys that I was having to control that would have been in initiative order, but we didn't have time for that. And so I had built up this, like, the climax was this moment at which you find out everybody's on your side, who you thought was on your side is a bad guy. Oh, and it's going to be the hardest combat that we've had up until now in the game. And while that happened, it wasn't the firework explosion that I had planned. And I think that only because out of game stuff caused me to make in-game changes. Right.
We don't have enough time, and so now I gotta shoehorn this thing in. I mean, also the way the players seem to handle these situations that you throw at them. You and I have talked a lot about this, where we're prepping and we're like, man, this is going to be so freaking cool when they're going to do this, and that's going to probably lead them this way, and then they're going to go here. And you come to me then on Tuesday morning, and I'm like, how was it last night? And you're like, they didn't do anything I thought they were going to do. Nothing. They went this way and talked to this chick the whole time. And I thought they were going to go over here and fight these rat guys. And I had this elaborate system set up for all these, these things I was going to pull, and it just doesn't happen. So I think it probably cuts both ways, where they don't understand the fun that they're kind of sapping from you. Not necessarily fun, but you have this plan and this thing that you want to have happen and go your way, and it doesn't go there that way a lot of times, right?
Well, and it's almost the other way around. It's almost like I'm having fun. It's almost like proud's not the right word, but like I'm having fun when all of a sudden they're running the game. They're playing the game. They're following up the murder mystery. They're bypassing all the combats in the castle. They are going around everything that has been set before them. And I think what got me down then was like, I was like, no, we're going to stick to the story, instead of being like, no, what you guys are doing is awesome, and I'm going to latch onto that, and let's keep going that way. Especially because I think trying to follow a really like richly detailed adventure like this one is actually it's quite difficult. It's very hard to run this adventure. And so when the players start making up the story and we get to sort of like do our own thing, I think it becomes more fun for everybody. And I just felt like I shut that down too fast.
I see. Interesting. I'm really excited. I know it's not time yet, but I'm really excited to hear what Seth has to say about all this kind of stuff.
Well, we can pull him in here.
Let's pull him in. I say we pull him in.
All right, we're talking about like letting our players down or not, or maybe not. And we have prepped Seth with some questions. So let's pop Seth in here. Welcome to the stream, Seth Kruse, friend of mine, fellow gamer, and way more experienced in role-playing games, both running and playing for probably more than a decade, I would assume.
Yeah, started in around 2009. So,
man, okay,
it's been a while.
That's about when we got into board games, Ben. That's about the time.
I was a little. I would think it was like 2011 when I got into board games.
Okay. Yeah, 2009, 2010 was about when I got into it, which is funny. And so RPGs now, most people, I think, did it the other way around, right? Was that for you, Seth? Did you get into RPGs first and then board games second, or how did that work for you?
No, I started board gaming probably in around 2007, 2008. And at the time, I also had a Friday night gaming group, video games, console gaming.
Yep.
I'd have a bunch of people over, we'd play console games, and randomly one of the guys that was over noticed that I had a handful of board games on my shelf, and they're like, "Hey, you like to play board games? I was at a local game shop and some GM was looking for players, and I'm going to sign up for his game. Do you want to come join me?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never really done role playing before, but sure, let's give it a shot." And talked to Christine about it, and she came too. So she and I did our first RPG together. That was cool.
Oh, that's cool. So the both of you went. What system was that you guys played?
That was Pathfinder.
All right.
Okay.
So
That's
your
pretty
first
robust.
When
game.
it first came out. Yeah.
Is Christine your wife, Seth?
Yeah.
Cool. So she plays too. That's really cool.
Yeah, not a lot anymore, but a little bit. Over COVID, I started a family game with the same beginner box rule set that Ben was just talking about with my two boys and Christine. So that was really cool.
So how did that go for you? Because your boys are a little bit older than Calvin and Elsa. And then Christine was also playing, which Emily has refused. So how did that go overall? And how far did you get through it?
We only played for about a year because after that we got another foreign exchange student, and I felt a little bit bad having like, okay, sorry, this is our family time, and
go in the basement.
Yeah,
you can't be involved with it. And I guess I could have had them roll up a character and be involved, and maybe I should have, but I don't know. I didn't, and so we didn't. But we played for about a year, and I had kind of a similar situation to you of, it got to their turn. All right, what are you going to do? Well, I want to do this. And okay, that's great. But then we'd get to the end of the session and like they had their entire list of like spells and special abilities that they never used. And, I'd try to remind them, hey, you've got this ability. You should do that every once in a while. And it just never came up, which, that's fine too. We were having a great time. So who cares? But the system is not really made for 8-year-olds.
Right. It's like it's made for like that teenager who's like, oh man, look at all these cool rules. Look at this.
I have
what if I did
nothing
this
to
spell?
do except learn and play
Read
this
the
game.
rules.
That's all I have. Yeah, nothing else to do. School and this.
Yeah.
Right. Where like if I have a 3rd level spell slot, I'm like, well, what can I use this on? I want to use it right now.
Want to do all the things.
Seth, as a player in Ben's campaign.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, here we go. How is he doing so far in your estimation?
Excellent. Yeah, we've been having an absolutely great time.
So do you feel any of what he's saying about how man, I don't think this was as cool for them? Does that happen to you, or do you think that's all in his head?
No. That's all just GM regret, and you'll have that all the time.
Okay,
when
that's
you're
a
GM, because like you anticipate things going one way, and the players do something else, and as a player, you're just along for the ride. I mean, you don't know what the GM had planned, and however the story goes, that's how the story goes, and that's what you're there for. So I do see it a little bit what he's saying now that he mentioned it about, I think Dylan was really hyped up about the whole private crime investigation that he was doing. And that was really cool. It could have gone somewhere like that, but I don't think that it was a problem that we didn't get to go down that road.
I know it was probably the first time there was a good like 15, 20 minutes where I just sat there. Well, like Dylan was trying to explain the plan to everybody, and I was
he was loving it. It was so good.
How do you as a player, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Ben, but how do you as a player, Seth, when something like that, like say you have something in mind that you want to do, Dylan, though, another player, is really excited about following this other path. how do you handle that as a player at the table if you have a different idea, or maybe I wanted to do something else, but they're really excited? Do you personally just kind of like, all right, well, just kind of like you said, go along for the ride, or does it depend on situation to situation?
I mean, I guess it depends on how excited I am about whatever I want to do, right?
Yeah, for sure.
if they're on a roll, I'm just going to say let them go for it. Especially being that Dylan is kind of a new player, I felt like probably the first 3, 4, 5 sessions, I was doing a majority of the talking. Like,
really,
I was the experienced player. Quinn's a little bit more quiet. I'm kind of quiet too, but I was trying to get outside my box a little bit. And so I was trying to, have the interactions with the NPCs and just keep the party moving all the time. So like Dylan taking the lead and wanting to be excited about something, I was more than happy to let him, go for it, man.
Well, so how would you resolve the situation if you were just as excited? Like, how would you handle it? I'm just as excited about the rot thread. I don't want to deal with this investigation. Like, how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, it's a party game, right? So if I'm excited about something, so is Dylan. Let's bring it up and ask the group what we want to do. It's like, I mean, we're a party, we're a team. We can make a vote on it and just see what we want to do. And then, if it's still something that I want to follow on after we do whatever he's doing, then we'll go down that path too.
I'll tell you what actually happens in our games is the party would just split up.
Oh no! What is that?
And that's fun too. Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you get to do like, okay, you followed on this thread and you walk around a corner and then you see this and it's like, okay, I'm going to stop you there. And you're like, back to the other group.
Yeah, back to their group. Who's with me? Who's going with me?
That's happened, 3 or 4 times now?
Oh,
it happens regularly.
Cool. That's cool.
So, one of the things I wanted to bring you on here to talk about, Seth, because we were talking about rules and numbers and stuff like that and like trying to play with kids compared to like, you are the opposite. Every time I've played with you, you are very good at building a character to be a good, right? Like finding the numbers, finding the combinations, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you feel like it's rewarding to build a powerful character and then use it to do powerful things, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, a lot of times that term can be called, like, power gaming or min-maxing or whatever. So, like, what are you looking for out of a campaign, out of a game session, about how you're going to build out your character? And, like, another good example you played a druid in our last big campaign. But you had, like, super low hit points. Sort of like your wild shape was cool, but you weren't like necessarily throwing fireball everywhere. Or like Gage, who somehow I don't understand why he had like plus 15 to hit. I never understood that math. Does that stuff? How does like how powerful you want your character to be, and how the characters at the table compared to each other end up being? How has that played out in your games, and how do you consider that? Like, can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess to go along with that, recently I was just kind of studying up for this session a little bit, and I knew you were going to talk to me about min-maxing. So I went online and looked, what is min-maxing? What do people think about it, talk about it, whatever? And I read a really good excerpt that basically summarized it really well. And it said min-maxing is like either one of two things. It's either a real negative connotation that both DMs and players have about another player because they're either overshadowing the party really bad, they are using it as like some sort of crutch or excuse to be a bad role player or a bad party member, or they're disrupting the game in like a not fun way. Mm-hmm. And so that's one side of the coin. And the other side, which is kind of the side that I fall on, is enjoying the game as like a creative optimization problem. Mm-hmm. And especially when I first started out playing Pathfinder, I got this rule book that's this thick, and it has all these rules, pages and pages of feats and abilities. And so I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is like a board game or whatever. And it's a puzzle and a challenge for me. How am I going to build the best character possible? Oh, well, I got to take this feat and it has a prerequisite. So I don't really want to take that feat now, but I have to because I need it to meet the requirements later, and doing all these things. And that was really fun to me, and that kind of goes into, there are different kinds of players, right? So I'm a player that loves that kind of thing. And some players are just there for the role play. And like some players are just there to eat the tasty snacks that we bring every week.
Right. That's true.
And
we have one of those.
There's all there's all different kinds of players. And so it's important to realize that there are those different players at the table. And especially if you're the one who's being like a min-max player, to think about everyone else at the table and make sure that everyone's having a good time, right? So I feel like there is, and there should be, a balance of not min-maxing to the point where you're ruining everyone else's fun, both the other players and the GM. And I mean, so and a good example of this is if you look at min-maxing in real life. So you think about historically, an engineer, let's say, is a very min-maxed person, right? You're really good at engineering, but like the historical connotation was, oh, he's an engineer, he can't talk to people. Yep. Right. He has no social skills. Same with like a nerd or whatever. And in current day, I don't think that that's really socially acceptable anymore. Like in engineering school, we go through all sorts of classes to get better at talking to other people and have good communication skills. And I think, that's kind of the same way it has to be in your role-playing game. You want to be really good at your character, but also make sure it's fun for everybody else. And another thing that I tried to do, especially when I was the druid, is make choices that maybe they weren't the perfect optimization choice, but they were the choice that made sense for my character, Corvin. So like I knew partway through that my wild shape forms that I was going into weren't that powerful anymore. Gage was overshadowing everybody. Evan was killing everything. But I wanted them to last a little bit longer. And so I was going to multi-class into something to give them a little bit of an HP bump. Okay, how do I do this? I could either take monk or I could take a barbarian subclass, and that would help a little bit. Well, Corvin was not really a mad character. There was no reason he would be ever going into a rage. It just didn't make sense for him. So I'm not going to take that class. I took a monk instead and said, his romantic interest, Azaka, at the time was kind of a hand-to-hand fighter. She taught him some monk skills. So, that just really worked out for his character. And I thought that was a fun choice, even though it wasn't the most optimal choice.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. So, if we then, I like what you're saying about being aware of your other players as a player and knowing, what sort of like role you're taking. Are you overshadowing people or whatever? What role then does the dungeon master have to take to recognize two things? One, what a player that wants to build a great character. How does a dungeon master build a game for that person? Is it through combats? Is it through encounters? And then at the same time, if a power discrepancy builds, how does a dungeon master then meet the needs of the other players at the table so they don't feel like they're being overshadowed by the character that's been built to be supreme at combat?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it's something that, all DMs should be watching out for and thinking about all the time. So I think that first you probably want to just double check that, hey, actually, is there even a problem there, right? So, maybe you do have one character that's really kicking all the ass, but maybe that's okay, right? So, like, think about when we play Overwatch. Like, you got your DPS guy, you got your healer guy, you got your tank, and
Yeah, that's true.
They're not all getting the same damage and the same score, but everybody's having a great time.
Everybody's
and that's okay.
making them, but you need everybody to win, right? Yeah, just because you got a high DPS number, you still got the other guys backing
mean
them up.
that everyone else isn't having fun. And so similarly with like your different player styles, your person who's the min-maxer, that's what they're there for. Maybe they need to be that guy. And maybe the person that's just there to have snacks, they could care less whether they're being the all-star in combat or not. So I think that's point number one is it even a problem? And so you can obviously know that by having good communication with your players. And that's probably key for all relationships, and especially DMing, is have regular conversations with your players. Ask them, hey, how did you feel about combat? Are you mad that dude is getting all the kills? Whatever.
What form? I'm being selfish for our own game, but this could probably help other people too. What form should that conversation take? Is it just at the end of a game session? Is it at the beginning? Is it like a special thing where you're like, hey guys, let's do a little check-in? Like how do you think that works? Is it just every once in a while just talking to people, or is it as a group doing it?
Yeah, I think that can go either way. I mean, like I've heard Ryan say on the previous episodes that after his sessions, he asks his kids, hey, what went well? What do you think sucked? Tell me right now. And I think that's a great opportunity to do it for any GM. Hey, did you like this? Should I do more of this? Did you think this sucked? I won't do it anymore. And then another option is, like, we have a Discord channel that we just used for posting random pics, or like
a lot of AI art.
You put in session notes sometimes. We have a special channel that's called Fireside Chats that you can only talk in character, which is kind of fun.
That's really cool.
And then you
somehow
also have
there's AI art in there. I don't know why.
You also have a player GM only private chat, and I know I've privately been giving you like some recaps on some of our sessions. Hey, I thought this was really awesome, or here's an opportunity for improvement, or whatever. So that's
well, and the awesome thing about that, like, that is super helpful for me to improve. It's also really, really helpful for me to be like, what do you like and don't like in a game? And the other thing is, then you bringing that stuff up and saying it means that you're going to get more of the game that you like. Right. So maybe a lesson to anybody out there who is running a game to tell your players, or players that are out there, to don't be afraid to tell your GM what you do and don't like, because the game is then going to turn into the game that you do like.
And then it sounds like, as the GM, don't be afraid to ask the players what they do. And
maybe I need to do more of that.
I don't think there's any shame in that, because I can understand from your perspective, maybe, Ben, because I think I would feel this way, is you don't want your players to feel like, you're just fishing for, tell me what was great, tell me how good I am.
So
you got to do it in a way where it's more just, I want your honest opinions and thoughts. Don't shit on me, but don't blow smoke.
Constructive criticism.
Right?
Constructive criticism, right?
Right. If you have something to say, I would love to hear it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Because the GM's not necessarily there to tell you. There are some people probably out there who are like the author GM. I wrote a story and I want to tell it to you, and you're going to live in it. But
you're talking right to me, Ben.
But I'm definitely more like, I just want to create a game that's fun. So tell me what you think is fun, and I'll make that the game.
Right. Like, especially for me, the main time that I was a series GM, I wrote all my own content, all of my own adventure, my own sessions, encounters, everything. So it was important to me to know, hey, was this any good?
Right.
Was it fun for you? Should I do that again, or should I do something else? And
I like that
I specifically wrote emails or like IM chats to some of the different characters. Hey, what did you like about this week? What did you think sucked? Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you should probably, I'm guessing you guys can pick up on, because I do this with my kids. It's easier with my kids because when they look bored, they're not trying to, they're not socially trying to, well, I'm just going to make them feel cool. They look terrible, so I'm like, okay, obviously they didn't like that. I would imagine that's a little more difficult with adults, but have you noticed that happen at all, Ben, where you're just kind of like, they don't seem as engaged this time, and so that's got to be a direct result of what I'm doing here.
Well, that's that's kind of tough. You know, we have a longer game session. It's got snacks. There's 6 people there, and it's a big table. Like, I mean, to see somebody pull a phone out is not necessarily like they're not having fun. It's you know, we're there for 4 hours. Like, it stuff happens. So it's not. You can maybe gauge when people are like really tuning out, but I don't know that necessarily happens a lot.
That's probably a really good thing, I'm going to guess, for you. You know,
yeah, I think at least in our group, everybody's there to be there. And so, sure, someone's pulling out a phone, but like for me, I'm taking session notes because I give the recap at the next week, or somebody might be looking up, oh, what's the next dumb picture I'm going to post in our group chat, or you know, whatever. But there are and definitely have been times where like somebody's having a side conversation when the GM's trying to like address the table. And I think as a GM, you gotta, I guess, I don't know, stand up for yourself and say, hey, over
Knock
here,
it off.
listen up,
get it out.
Yeah.
And I know that I did a lot of yelling at players when I was the GM, especially because I wrote all the content. So it was like, I didn't spend 3 hours sitting at home last night writing this crap for you guys not to hear it, you know?
So how much, when you were running the game, Seth, how much were you thinking about what happens next in the story, the chess pieces on the board, and how much were you thinking about how do I make this player's character go through something? How do I reward this person, or how do I have this character have an experience? Were you ever like thinking about each character individually, or were you like, I'm just going to build a world and a story and I'm going to let the characters play in it? Like, were you ever molding it to everybody, or was it a mix?
No, it was somewhat of a mix. Like, there were a few things that I just wanted to happen, so I just did those. But a lot of my sessions were very specifically crafted for the individual players at the table. Like, we had a guy who was a bard, and he had some special attack that was extra damage to crystalline creatures, and it's like, oh, that's cool. We're never gonna fight a crystal. Where are you ever gonna find one of those? And so I was
we're
like,
in the middle of a goblin war.
Yeah, but we were in the middle of a desert, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a temple, and there's a bunch of crystal golems. This is gonna be so cool. And you know, that was a little bit of a GM fail because I didn't realize just how powerful that spell was gonna be against those creatures, and I think he killed all of them like that. And
okay, here's the thing, though. Was that a fail? Or did he get to feel like a badass?
Yeah, was he like, this is great?
I don't know. I think everybody had a great time, so whatever, you know?
Yeah.
As long as everyone's having fun, that's the real thing. That's
yeah, it's probably that GM, that what you talked about before, where as the GM, you're like, I didn't intend for that to happen. Oops.
Yeah. It felt like a failure to me, but I think everybody else had a great time, so who cares, right?
Yeah, this was my thing that was supposed to be hard for you, and you've completely destroyed it instantly.
Yeah,
I've let you down.
It's hard to remember that they have no clue what the hell you have planned. They have no idea that this was intent. They defeated this quicker than you had planned on them defeating it. You know, they don't know that. Right. So if they knew that, they might be disappointed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where you're disappointed because you're like, shit, they just destroyed this. Oh man, they weren't supposed to, but from their perspective, they're like, we are awesome. What's next?
Yeah,
what do we do next?
For sure.
All right. Well, here I'm going to ask you a question, and I feel like Quinn talked about this when we had him on the first episode about what's going on behind the screen, right? How much fudging? Because let's say you're the kind of player who wants to use the system, whether it's Pathfinder, whether it's D&D, whether it's whatever, Starfinder, anything. You're going to use the rule book to build something that is capable and powerful or really good at one thing, destroying crystalline creatures. I want to fight the crystal monster so I can finally use my spell. So if you're building to be strong in the system, how do we need to follow the system to a T? Like, how much fudging can go on? Can HPs be fudged? Can rolls be fudged? Like, what's going on behind the screen to still keep the game rewarding for somebody who's building a powerful character?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think the very first thing that you need to determine to know just how much fudging and stuff you're going to do behind your screen is what kind of game are you running, and what should your players expect from you as a GM, especially in terms of how likely are they to lose their character. So I think that's a really important conversation that all GMs should have with their players. Like, for instance, our friend Mitch, which Quinn talked about as well. He has no qualms about a total party kill at any moment. And so everyone was always just
terrified.
Scared. We're going to die.
God, oh no.
You roll into a room and someone goes down, everybody just grabs him and we all run. I mean, like, this is a bad situation. We weren't supposed to be in this dungeon, and so that's one type of GM.
But you knew that up front. Did he say that, or did you learn that playing with him?
I think we knew it up front, and if we didn't, we found out quickly enough.
Okay, all right.
But Quinn is probably somewhere in the middle. Like, I think that he probably wouldn't be afraid of killing someone, but usually would probably make a way for them to be brought back or whatever. And I felt probably a little bit more anxious probably than everyone else because of being an experienced player. He would probably have less qualms about killing me off than the new players.
Yeah.
And then with your campaign, I don't think that we've ever really been in like a scary situation where we think anyone's going to die. And that's fine too, because, when you have a game and you're building a character and you've been there with them a long time, it sucks to lose your character, right? And we are the heroes. We're supposed to be overpowered. So having a game where the heroes don't die, that's cool too, right? But it should still be a challenge. And so that's when you start looking at, okay, how much are you going to fudge things behind the screen? And the way that I've always treated it is let it be random at the start, for sure. Just like whatever your roll goes until you get, I don't know, a little ways into the combat, because, if I'm rolling crits all night, nobody wants to hear that I've rolled my 5th crit.
Yeah, another crit comes out.
And I mean, that's happened before. Like, I just hit 20s all night long. It was amazing. But eventually I had to be like, okay, everyone's dying and I probably shouldn't do that again.
Right.
Likewise, if you're rolling 1s all night, eventually the combat is just way too easy. All right, forget that. I rolled an 18. I hit you. You got to have the combat be at least somewhat meaningful, even if you're sucking at rolling all night. So there's a little bit of fudging there. And then, Quinn talked a lot about adjusting HP on the fly, which I can agree to a certain extent. But I also feel like if you're having to do that regularly, recurringly, you probably didn't plan your combat well enough. You should really be upping your CR level for your creatures or something like that, rather than just having to fix it as you go.
Yep. Yeah, and I've run into that quite a bit with the adventure module that I'm running. I feel like the combats do not equate to the power level that it gives to the players.
Well, and you also got to remember that you're playing with a table full of gamers. I mean, we've got a whole table full of engineers. Yeah. We all love board games and video games. Even Stephanie, who, maybe she's not the same level of RPG in-depthness, she still plays like Skyrim, so she knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so the difficulty that we're bringing to the table as players is maybe a lot different than what some other tables are going to see, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's just one of those things where, like, when you first start, you're like, oh, okay, I have this thing, and it comes with pre-built encounters. That's sort of a boon. That's a good thing of this. Well, those encounters haven't been balanced for your party, right? Maybe you have maybe it was balanced for 4 and you have 5. Maybe they have found a few extra rewards, or they're good at playing games or whatever. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well, this needs to be tweaked and twisted. And having stuff pre-built is not necessarily the advantage that I necessarily thought it was. And it's like, oh, okay, well, the better thing is actually I could probably build these from scratch using different monsters, and it's going to be more at an equivalent power level and probably more fun for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think another thing that kind of goes along with that in the adjusting the HP is that it's always going to be more fun for the players to fight something super scary and badass and have it nearly kill them, and you have to kind of pull punches at the end rather than them fighting some kind of mundane enemy that no one can figure out why it has so many HP.
Yeah.
I mean,
put something out there that's too hard, and in the absolute worst case, you got to pull some punches.
Right. Your players will never cease to amaze you of the shenanigans that they pull off. I mean, I had an extremely difficult, challenging situation set up. I had an avalanche that was going to come down with like hot lava, and these guys could get stuck in the lava. And I spent all this time figuring out the calculations for, what happens if they get buried by the lava, and what's the climb rate, and is that difficult terrain and whatever. And then like the lava flows coming down, and they had just leveled up the time before, and somebody's like, yeah, I got a new teleport spell. I just get everybody out of there.
No! 3 hours of prep down the drain.
Yeah, there's always something. The characters always have something that you don't know about. So,
well, Ryan, you were talking about earlier. You killed Lexi, and she was crying. Like, what did you do then? Did you have to make something up? So, how did you get out of that scenario?
No, so we had never been in a situation like you mentioned that Seth was down for the first time. Imagine Seth being down for the first time, but none of you know how being down works. And so in Seth's mind, he might be like, "Well, I'm fucked." So that's kind of what was
zero
happening.
HP. I'm dead.
We had not. I had not. So I didn't go over every rule with them. I've kind of like been like, okay, this situation happens. Now here's what we do. So I hadn't had to go over dying with them because they've not really come that close. There was one scenario where I had Cameron was bitten by a zombie, and he was turning into a zombie throughout the scenario, and he was just kept losing a health. And if he would have gotten down to 0, he would have turned. And he was down to 1 health before they defeated what they needed to do, and he got the antidote. So that was as close as anyone had been to death. So when Lexi was crying, she thought that I was going to walk over to her and rip up her character sheet right in front of her and throw it in her face. You know what I mean? That's, I think, what she thought. I think she was like, I'm dead. I've been playing this character Ayla for, the last 3 months, and now she's dead. And out of nothing, this stupid crab just killed me. So what I did was we stopped for a minute, and we kind of brought ourselves out, and we were like, hey, first of all, it's okay. I'm going to read the rules now on what happens when you die. And, you have basically 2 rounds to try to heal. Anybody else can heal you. I imagine it's like D&D where, other people can help you. Right. And so once that happened, she didn't really get over it. But it ended up being fine when we talked about it later. It didn't traumatize her. She still wants to play.
Well, what are your guys' thoughts on on Dimension 20? They have the Box of Doom, where some dice rolls come in front of the screen, right? And you're like, no, this is all up to the dice now. I'm not rolling this behind the screen. I'm going to roll it right in front of you, and we're going to see what happens. Like, did you ever do anything like that, Seth, or have in any of your games people done stuff like that?
I think occasionally, just for like comedic relief or whatever. And definitely when 20s have been rolled and somebody's like, no freaking way, lift up the DM screen.
There it is.
Right there, man.
There it is. Quick turn it to a 20 before you lift it
all
up.
of my rolls, Ben, happen in there's no screen. Every roll that I make is they all see it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm only rolling D6s and trying to get a 5 or a 6, so it's not.
I gotcha.
It's not like difficult for them to, I don't have to like really finagle anything. Yeah. My pulling punches has always been role-playing wise. And that was something I was going to ask you, Seth. As the GM, you talked about, maybe you'll pull punches. You'll have a enemy who's really badass. And then maybe at the end, if it's coming down to the wire and they're probably going to die, maybe you're going to like, okay, I want them to win, so I'll pull some punches. Now, do you make these decisions based on what you think will be the better story moment for the group? Or are you making these decisions, or maybe it's both, based on what you can see the players experiencing? Like, okay, they look like they're down, so I'm going to give them a little boost here. Or they look like they're bored with how well they're doing, so I'm going to make it a little harder and tweak it that way. Like, how do you go about doing that as the GM?
Yeah, I think that like you guys talk about the rule of cool, right? So whatever is going to make the adventure be the most fun. Like you talked about Quinn's campaign when we killed that dragon that was way overpowered for us. Yeah. It was so awesome, but it never should have happened, right?
No,
and
never.
So having that happen is just going to be a great time for everyone. And I think that's kind of always where my head goes is, okay, I put this stuff in here. It's way too powerful. That's fine. These are the heroes and they're supposed to be amazing. So if I have to nerf it just a little bit to make it work, that's fine. Whatever.
Well, and you bring up a good point there with the dragon thing, or other stuff. I think you get to the end of a campaign or whatever, and when you talk about the cool stuff that happened, it was always player generated.
Yeah.
And I think that's good to keep in mind as a running the game. I need to keep in mind is that I don't have to build cool situations. I just have to build the environment, and the players are going to come up with the crazy cool things.
Right. Well, and a lot of times the time when those really cool things happen is when you're a player or 2 player or 3 players down. Like it's at the end of a really intense battle and like this guy's out of commission, this guy's out of spells, and then like the 1 player comes through and saves the day. Like that's the really cool moments. And that's another way to deal with someone who's being an overpowered player that's kind of killing the combat every time, is setting up a specific enemy that your other players can shine against, right? So whether it's a crystalline enemy for somebody, or whether you take out that overpowered player, you can't take him out with hit points because his AC is too high, but have him make a wisdom save or something because he sucks at that. Or have your characters have to get into this certain area that they have to sneak into, or that they have to talk their way past some guards, and they got low charisma, so they're not making the talk pass to get in there, or they got big clunky armor, they can't sneak well, or whatever. There's lots of little ways that you can get around someone who seems like they're overpowered. You just got to look at a different tactic of taking that character out. Like, I mean, think about our party. There's an overpowered wizard ready to cast against us almost every combat. But what do we do first thing? Take the wizard out.
See, guys.
Yep. Ah!
I need 2 wizards, and they need to be more than 20 feet apart from each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you have to choose.
Put the pressure on, right? Have one hiding in the woods out back that we never saw.
Isn't that fun a little bit for you, Ben, though, when you have this situation, like this encounter for them, and you get to see the party just completely dismantle what you've created? I know it's partly a bummer, but isn't it also partly like, okay, that was pretty freaking sweet?
I think it is.
I'm proud of them.
There is a balance there. I think there's a balance there between making decisions and adjustments to purposefully make interesting things for the players. Like, there is another wizard and he comes out because right now I need you guys to actually be scared. This needs to be hard. But there's other times where it's like you set it up ahead of time, and I know how you guys are this. But like, and then just see what happens. The wizard gets the silence, and now he can't do anything. You sneak past all the guards or talk your way in and avoid every combat that you could have gotten into. Like, there is something rewarding about like being outsmarted.
Yeah.
But like the scenario you built, getting outsmarted. You want
to let your characters have their shining moment, right? So if somebody's built their character to be just this super badass, and they attack something, let them kill it. Whatever. Yeah. You were expecting, this battle's going to take a long time, and they just freaking rickrolled it. well, that's tough, right? Maybe just let it happen. Or if you really do want it to go on a long time, like you and I talked about this, Ben, maybe you give it a second form, like it goes down,
Right.
but then it comes back
It
up.
comes
right?
back up. Yeah.
This isn't even my final form.
Right, Vegeta. Yeah.
And or maybe it dies, and then its brother comes out of the back room. Like there's a whole second
he's even
boss.
angrier.
Yeah, you thought
The
it
big
was
brother.
the end, but it wasn't. So that I feel like that's maybe a more interesting way to deal with characters that kind of break your campaign, right? And plus that still allows whoever is going for that big moment to be rewarded by it. Like
Yeah.
I want to bring up so Quinn used this as his example of adjusting HP on the fly, which worked out really well for him as a GM, but it worked out horribly for me as a character. So this was me playing my best min-max that I possibly could, spent hours studying this rule book, building the best character I possibly could. We made it to the final boss. I had potions. Everybody in our party, we had a bard. They were buffing me. I had gear. I had equipment. This was finally a dragon. First one I ever fought. He was evil. I was a paladin, so I was smiting him. This was my shining moment. Everything I had worked up towards led to this moment. And I walked up there and I freaking slashed that dragon, and I did like an astronomical amount of damage, more damage than anyone at the table had ever seen before. And I was like, oh, totally killed.
This is it.
Yeah,
This is
awesome.
And
HP
Quinn's like,
onto it.
nope, didn't die. And I was just like,
yeah, it laughs at you as it breathes.
And so it
fire on you.
didn't even like, it didn't fix me. Like I was just thinking to myself, oh, well, I guess I gotta min-max harder next time, So what worked for him of making the big bass battle longer didn't work for me as a player, which, that's not everything works perfectly for everyone every time. But
well, that story is the reason why, the whole reason we wanted to bring you on here and talk about player expectations, and I think we've kind of circled around it, talked about it, and gotten to some good points on it. But that right there of like, when is the time? When is the time to do that? There are times to make your boss have another health bar, or he's way stronger than you anticipated. And there are times that, like, seeing that this player character has spent the entire campaign building up to this moment. This is everything they've done up until now has built to this attack. And look, it worked. It did whatever, an insane amount of damage. And that, like, there's the payoff for that, right? I've been saving my like special thing until right now, and here it is, and boom, it goes off. I will say, not to necessarily wrap things up yet, but like, our conversation tonight has made me be like, there are times for the GM should do things, and there are times that the GM should let players do things. And the most important thing is probably just to ask your players what they do and don't like. Yeah, for sure. Well, and like, I think that Quinn probably did the right thing in there. We don't need the final battle to end in one hit. That's not very fun, right? So, but maybe, like we talked about earlier, a cooler way to do it would be a second form, or another big boss comes in and helps, or whatever. And that game had all sorts of problems. Right, because it would still
give you your moment.
I killed this
thing, but now we have this. Oh no, this other thing happens.
Right, and we were super high level at that point, which it gets very cumbersome and not really playable. Probably beyond level 10, especially in Pathfinder. I mean, at that point, I literally wrote myself an Excel spreadsheet to track like what my attack and damage would be, because it was just so complicated. Oh, no. It would take me, like, no joke, 5 minutes to figure out what my 2 attack bonus was every time, because this guy gave me a buff which changed this, whatever. And so my min-max character caused other people to have regrets, and I was the next GM, and our friend Mitch was so not upset about it, but just like, I'm going to do that too. He went online and found, okay, what is the most min-max character, and played that.
Oh my god.
He was a halfling cavalier riding a boar or something, and he could roll like a single d12 and do 150 points of damage. It was the dumbest thing ever, but that was the way the rules were written. And
but
so
then, what do you do as the GM in that situation? Because I can kind of sympathize maybe with Quinn, and like you said, maybe he could have done things a little bit differently to make it as cool for you. But I can definitely sympathize with, man, I spent hours on this battle, and you just walked in and did 150 points of damage and killed him.
And that was
everyone else having fun,
Right. It was really hard to GM when we had that character doing 150 points a hit, and then other characters who were doing like 12,
30. Yeah.
It's like, I have to basically have, this sky battle over here happening between the super powerful guys, and then everybody else doing another thing. And that becomes really hard. And that's kind of why
disparity happen. How does that disparity happen? Like, is there anything the GM can do?
That was kind of a broken system a little bit. Like, playing above level 10 is just really hard, I think, in every system, because the spells get so powerful and weird, and it's just really hard to manage. But I mean, the other things that I did was like purposefully split the party. Had the super powerful guy go do his own thing for a while. Everybody else that was kind of more similar level did other things. I brought in like puzzles and riddles and stuff so that it wasn't all combat based, and made it more fun that way. I allowed them to buy basically anything they want in the player's handbook, because they had boatloads of gold at that point. So somebody bought like what was essentially this huge 4-legged walker. So they had that was like stomping on enemies. So then the flying boar didn't seem that badass anymore,
Damn.
So there
like
were
an AT-AT?
Yeah, essentially, right. It was a spider, I think, but same difference.
Yeah.
Man, but there were things like that. But I guess the other thing is he retired his character after that. Like, everybody could agree, all right, that was dumb. It was funny, but let's not do that anymore. And, you got to have that conversation with your players at your table, and that character specifically who's doing that just to make a point or to be a jackass or whatever. All right, this is not fun for everybody else at the table. Let's do something different.
Yeah, that seems to be the key, right? Is to like not wait until the end of the campaign to be like, none of that was fun for me because of how broken your character was.
Constant communication.
Well, we should have talked about that like 6 months ago.
Yeah, well, and that was kind of the learning point for me about my paladin character. That was really only the second character I'd ever played, and we got to this too high of a level, and I realized, okay, that probably wasn't fun for everybody else because of what I was doing. So in the future, I'm not going to be that guy anymore, right?
Right. Unfortunately, not everybody's as self-aware. It's got to be tough to GM certain players who are like, this is amazing. I did it. I want to do this every time.
Well, now, certainly. And that's where communication is important, right? And people will tell you this about any conflict resolution that you're having, whether it's at work or your marriage or being a GM with players. Communication is key, right? You need to talk to the other players at the table, make sure they're still having a fun time. The trouble player, make sure they even know, because maybe they're not even realizing they're there. They're like, oh, I figured out the rules. This is the best character that I could make. I'm succeeding. I'm having a great time. Right. This is awesome. Winning. They don't even realize that everyone else at the table is like, screw this
kind
guy.
of blows for us.
Sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't get to do anything cool.
I guess we'll like fight some sort of like ancient dragon and watch you beat it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't get killed.
Yeah. Right. Well, it does seem like that's the overarching thing of this episode then, Ben, doesn't it? Communication.
It did. Player expectations turned into communication. Find out what your players want, find out what your players like, what they don't like, and also have everybody talk to each other to make sure everybody's having fun, because that's why we're getting together, right? That's why us as game masters are putting in all this work. We're trying to make fun for everybody. So make sure that everybody is having fun, and let's all talk. I think that's a good. I did not expect that to be the lesson for tonight, but I think we
like
actually learned something.
Yeah, we did. We did learn something there. That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that, Seth. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Seth, for joining the show. It was awesome to have you on for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great time.
Yeah, great to meet you too.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
And thanks for everybody who tuned in. If you are watching this later or listening to the audio of this, you can always catch us live on the second Wednesday of every month on the Date Night Dice Twitch. Go ahead and check out all of our other fun Date Night Dice stuff. We've got the Date Night Thrice podcast. We've got the D-List podcast. Go check out the Gamecasters podcast if you actually want to hear about board games. Ryan does an excellent show. And until next month, thanks for tuning in and have some fun adventures.
See ya.
Bye.